We are live.
All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me via Zoom is Bob Hutchins, and in the room is Marcel Larondo. The assessor today is Nathan Cooper, and the recording secretary is Belen Rojo. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along in the City of Winnipeg Border Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matter for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. We advise that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to their assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm that the points of appeal with your property to be addressed, with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 2 through 8 on our docket today. Ms. Rojo, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Nathan Kupfer.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Mark Newman.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, so the first item we'll be hearing today is 739 Henderson Highway. So Mr. Assessor, you can proceed.
That is roll number 02-011-366-100, 739 Henderson Highway. This is a one-story bank currently occupied by CIBC. It was constructed in 1950, and we have some minor renovations there with an effective year of 1959. Leasable area 4,976 square feet, and I'm recommending the 2023 assessment be maintained today at $1,180,000. Page 2 of my brief has a photo along Henderson Highway of the subject, as well as notes the 2 recent sales for the subject property, one in August of 2017 and another in December of 2016, with sale prices laid out before you there, one at 1.1 million, the other at 962,000. Page 3 of my brief has an overhead view of the subject property. As you can see, the CIBC bank there. Not a lot of extra land here. As you can see, there's probably maybe 6 parking stalls at the back, something like that, 6 to 8. And below that, I have my rent comparables. This is the same, I believe the same rent comparables I'm submitting for all of the properties that we're going to be discussing today. They're all banks. And more importantly, they're all standalone banks. So these aren't banks that are in little retail strips or anything like that. They're all standalone buildings similar to the subjects that we'll be speaking about today. Banks do tend to rent for more than either office or retail properties in my experience, as is laid out before you here in my table, showing an average rental rate just under $25 a foot, a median of 23, and the min-max of $14.89 and $36.70. That minimum, $14.89, is my comparable number one, is the subject that we're speaking on right now. This is the lowest rent I could find for a standalone bank. And it is being reported at $14.89. Page 4 of my brief has our modeled workup here. This is, of course, all being done on income, as well as the rest of the properties that we'll be discussing today. We have 3,428 square feet of main floor space, and then 1,548 square feet basement space. That merged rate would be 80,253 divided by 49.76, giving you an average of $16.13 between the two spaces. Vacancy of 2%. Our expenses are 3%. That's an increase of 1% over last year. And a capitalization rate of 6.4% for this property gives us a modeled value of $1.180 million. Page 5 of my brief has that breakdown, again, including expenses, shortfall, and capitalization rate. Page 6 of my brief, I'm sure you've all seen before. This is our general capitalization rate table referencing Collier, CBRE, as well as Cushman Wakefield, and showing the city's model parameters as well. Like I said, we don't track, as far as I know, nobody tracks banks specifically in terms of cap rates. They generally tend to fall on the lower end, as banks make very good tenants. If I was going to direct you one way or the other, I'd say they generally fall somewhere between an office and a retail. But again, as all the banks that we're going to be discussing today are standalone banks, I would caution away from using comparables within retail strips in that manner. If we keep scrolling down, we have an income and expense report for this property. As I said, it's not owner occupied. CIBC is the tenant. So they're reporting a net operating income of just under $67,000 based on that $14.89 net rent. Their area leased, their reporting is slightly different from ours. I didn't get to the bottom of why that is exactly. Like I said, $67,000 net operating income being reported, which is not far off from the $75,000 we have modeled, and I think fits well into the sale prices that I mentioned earlier. If we were to take, what's that, 67,000 divided by our most recent sale price, which is 1.1 million, you get a 6% capitalization rate, which is right around where you're going to find most of our banks are falling today. And I think that that information supports our model value well. So, like I said, I will be recommending that the 2023 assessment be maintained today for this property. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newman?
Yes. So as you noted, looking at page 4 of your brief, the square footage, 3428 main, 1548 basement, you've noted that that's different than what the owner is reporting. You've now seen some measured certifications of the space. Is the city prepared to adjust the space?
I haven't seen a measured certification of the space, no.
You haven't seen it?
No. Where was that?
Well, it was in the brief that we submitted, but I guess we'll get to it. Is it common to have, 1,546 square feet in the basement, or 1,548, that's approximately 30% of the space. Is it common to have 30% of the space in the basement?
I can't say if it's common or not.
You don't know?
No, can't say if that's common.
Okay. Mr. Cuffer, is this the first cycle of assessments for which you're doing banks?
Yes.
Do you know Is there a change in capitalization rate depending on the square footage of the premises?
I can't say definitively if the square footage will impact our model cap rate.
So, okay. And a 2% vacancy. You said that this property falls between an office and a retail, that the city doesn't track banks, but that it falls between an office and a retail, correct? That's what you said?
What I said.
Why is the vacancy at 2%? Why isn't the vacancy higher?
I would say that based on the best available information, that's how it was modeled at 2%.
And what information would that be?
The income and expense mailers that we receive from property owners, including banks, including some office, including some retail.
A 2% rate would suggest that does the city believe that bank space does not go vacant? Is that why it's so low?
No, I wouldn't say the city believes that.
You wouldn't say that. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcel, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Bob, any questions?
Yes. Could the assessor tell me what corner this bank is located on Henderson Highway?
Yes, I can. Zoom in really quick. It's on the corner of Kimberly and Henderson.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's my only question.
Okay. I guess the issue seems to be an issue on the square footage. Where did you get your square footage from?
To my knowledge, our square footage is unchanged from any previous tenants. Obviously, the building gets added within our system based on field forms that we get, information that we get, and we don't generally change it when somebody fills out their income and expense mailer. If they report something that's slightly different from what we have on file, we won't rush to make that adjustment. Generally, square footage doesn't appear or disappear in that way. Sometimes through some lease agreements, that square footage can be counted differently. Certainly, if it's going to be an issue of contention, we can arrange to have an inspection in the future.
Okay, thank you. No more questions then. You can proceed, Mr. Newman, with your presentation.
Thank you. So going to page 2 of my brief, the cover page is numbered 1. So page 2 of the brief, we've got a square footage issue. And so that I don't jump the panel around, although I'll reference it now, I'll take it in sequence by pages. And I'll come to the measurements which are part of the submission. The rent in place is $14.89 a square foot. In fact, there are lots of banks that have low rents like this. If you look at my page 3, I've made reference to an RBC on Roblin at $14.50 a square foot, a building on Ellis at $15, another building at 235 Marion, which is actually one of the assessor's comps. I have a rate of $16.50. And then I've also given you some office rates on Henderson Highway. 232 Henderson at $12, 1215 Henderson, 2 different units there. One at $11.05, one at $16. Ultimately, I use the rent in place of $14.89 a square foot. I think it's important that we have in mind that 30% of the accessible space in this building is in the basement. In my experience, it's rare that you've got space in a basement like this. And certainly that space has a much lesser value, which is reflected by the assessor's rate for the basement of $4.21. So the 2% vacancy, I asked the assessor about that, and the reality is there are lots of bank branches that are closing and have closed. There's a variety of reasons for that. Banks are consolidating their operations. The Scotia Bank at Main Street in Luxton, the Scotia Bank at Corden and Daly, the Scotia Bank at Corden and Waterloo, the Assiniboine Credit Union at 275 Broadway. There are others. The West Toba Credit Union building is up for sale. And there's various articles and statistics that speak to the closure of bank branches. And again, I'll show you those in a moment so that I don't have to jump you around in the presentation. I have a separate submission on non-recoverable expenses. I know that all the panel members here today are familiar with that submission, that they've heard it many times in the past. What I've been doing, subject to what the panel wants to tell me to do, is I've been leaving the non-recoverable as a separate part of the submission and dealing primarily with the other issues first. So if that's acceptable, I'll continue to do that to the panel.
Yep, that'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. So then I want to talk a little bit about the real estate market, and beginning at page 4 of my materials, what I've done is I've given you a little bit of history on COVID, and I think it's important that we not lose sight of this. In March of 2020, a state of emergency was declared. The economy fundamentally shut down. A variety of public health orders followed at various points in time thereafter. A bit of a yo-yo effect in terms of we're opening, we're closing, we're opening limited. But it's created a whole variety of issues. There's been conflicts in terms of employees not wanting to be in the workplace with those who are not vaccinated. And so that has created issues for all sorts of employers in terms of whether they work remotely. There's been issues with payment of rent. There's been issues with COVID rent subsidy programs provided by the government. There's been retail capitalization rates. I'm at page 7 now. And again, banks are a bit of a funny property, I suppose, in some way, in the sense that are they office, are they retail, are they somewhere in between? The assessor suggests they're somewhere in between. But I think the reality is that capitalization rates, and I'm on page 8 now, they represent the required or acceptable rate of return on a real estate investment. It's influenced by a number of items, which include the perceived risk associated with the investment's income capacity, investor expectations for appreciation, and the required or available returns in other investment vehicles. So what are investor expectations? What's the retail economic climate? I think investor expectations have become more uncertain. I think that the retail climate has become more uncertain. We've got a lot of things happening in the retail marketplace. I'm on page 9 now. And I do appreciate that we're talking about a bank here. But again, is it retail? Is it office? Where does it fall? We've got the advent of online shopping. And you might say, well, what's online shopping got to do with the bank? And the simple answer is a lot of us don't go into a bank anymore. I haven't been in the bank in forever because I'm now able to do all of it either on my computer or, frankly, on my phone. But what that's doing, like everything else that can be done remotely, is it's dampening the need for space, and it's creating some pressure on the demand for space, which in turn makes investor expectations more uncertain, which in turn has an impact on capitalization rates. I'm at page 10 now, and you see there the listing of capitalization rates. for the 2020 cycle at the bottom of the page. And you can see that the 20th percent and 80th percentiles were 6.4 and 7.05% for strip properties, for example. And then at the top of page 11, you've got the assessor's chart for 2023. And again, you see that the 20th percentile is 6%, the 80th percentile is 6.8%. I'll say to you simply that a building that has 30% of its leasable area, in my mind, is at the high end of the range in terms of quality of the property. And it's not in relative terms as desirable a property as would be one that's on a single floor plate or single level. Page 11 references a study conducted by Altus Group across Canada. And what it speaks about is the cap rate expectations of the marketplace. And for retail top quality, half of the participants expected that the cap rates would increase for top quality property, for lower quality property. A majority of the respondents, 75%, expected cap rates to increase. And again, what it's doing is it's reflecting the uncertainty of the marketplace and what's going on in the market, contributed to by COVID, but also contributed to by other types of considerations like increasing remote working and those types of considerations. If we go to page 15, I've got the attributes of various buildings and what helps in differentiating different types of properties from each other and placing them in the spectrum of good, better, best, or poor, for example, in terms of the quality of the real estate. And then I've got some office capitalization rates, again, from the assessor's chart. And what they're telling us is 20th and 80th percentiles, 5.6 or 6.9 for a suburban B. Of course, this is not a suburban B office building. This is, if it were an office building, frankly, it would be a pretty pedestrian office building. As the assessor noted, parking is limited number of stalls. So the assessor's got the cap rate at 6.4%. I think the vacancy at 2% is too low, and I'll explain that further to you in a moment. I'm going to leave the vacancy where I am, but I'm doing it on the basis that there will be an increase to the capitalization rate. And for some reason, the spreadsheet that reflected my calculation of value at $861,000 got detached from the original brief. And that's why it was sent to you as a separate standalone document, which was addressed at the outset of the hearing today. Let me take you through my attachments. Page 17 is a picture of the branch. Page 18 was the calculation of the assessment. Page 19 and 20 are the measurements provided by an external consultant. This space was measured in 2016, and it was measured at 1351 in the basement and 3144 on the main floor. I found it interesting that, Mr. Harden, when you asked the assessor about the square footage, the questionnaires that have been reporting this property for years have been at 4,495 square feet and not at the 4,900 plus square feet that the assessor is using. But be that as it may, we do have the certification here. We do have the measurements done by a measurement company. And although the assessor noted that he wasn't aware of any measurements, I'm assuming that he simply had not noted that in the brief. Page 22 is statistics from the Canadian Bankers Association. And the point of these statistics is that in Manitoba, over the last 5 years, between 2016 and 2020, 15 bank branches have closed. And if you look across Canada, it's gone down by over 400 bank branches. And that's simply to speak to the reality of the fact that bank branches are closing. I think people at one time thought if I've got a bank as a tenant, I'm set for life. The reality is you're not. Bank branches are closing. That's part of the reason why I think the vacancy should be higher, but I am prepared to leave the vacancy at the 2% on the basis that the risk will be reflected in the capitalization rate. What then follows is a series of newspaper articles. This one from the Globe and Mail about the Canada's network of bank branches expected to shrink. And it's the story of what is anticipated to occur. Page 26 is another story. You can see that was from, at the bottom right-hand corner, CBC News in May of 2017. And this is talking about bank closures in Winnipeg. In the top paragraph, major banks are accused of abandoning Winnipeg's North End. 2 upcoming closures, CIBC at Selkirk and McGregor and a Bank of Montreal at Selkirk and McGregor right across the street. CIBC closing a branch on McPhillips. TD and Royal Bank also closing branches. And again, the point simply is banks are closing. Page 27 is another article to the same effect about banks closing, this one in the context of TD. And then page 30, again, this is a reference to the same Globe and Mail article that I referenced earlier, but it's from another source. And then starting at page 31, what I address with you is the evolving trend for banks in terms of technology, in terms of their innovation. In the left-hand side of the page, fast facts, more than 2/3 of Canadians, 68% now do most of their banking digitally, online, mobile banking. Branches are important, but as I said to you earlier, I haven't been in a branch in a very long time. I go there only on a very limited basis, and I'm doing things mobile. And this is the story about how mobile banking is gaining. And of course, COVID simply reinforced that. People did not want to go into branches. And then at page 34, another article. And again, in the left-hand side, fast facts, 90% of Canadians believe banking's become a lot more convenient because of new technology. 78% are using digital channels to conduct most of their banking. 89% use banking in the last year and a half. And my point again simply is that this is the evolving way of the world. It's putting pressure on bank branches, and the risk and uncertainty of vacancy, of course, either has to be reflected in vacancy or it needs to be reflected in the capitalization rate. So if I can then take you to that extra page that you were given, which is my calculation. Does the panel have it? Are we good?
Yeah.
Yes, we have it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So what I've done here is 4,495 square feet based on the measured space, $14.89 a square foot. I'm using the 2% vacancy. I'm using a 7% non-recoverable, which I'll speak to in a moment. And that generates an NOI of $60,281. And the assessor notes the actual net operating income is $66,000. That difference, of course, is reflected in vacancy and non-recoverable, as well as the shortfall. And then I've used a 7% capitalization rate for the reasons I've articulated, and that turns into a value of $861,000. So subject to the panel's direction, I would stop there, allow questions, and then deal with the non-recoverable separately if that's what you wish.
I prefer to deal with the non-recoverables now rather than.
Then I'll do that. And I'll be brief because I know that you've all heard this before. So let me start by noting that we've gone through a bit of an evolution over the last number of cycles. If we go back to 2018, Certainly, the perspective is that the total non-recoverable at that point was 7%. We go to 2020, it becomes 2%. We come to 2023, it becomes 3%. The issue isn't the concept. I think the assessor recognizes that there are expenses that are not recoverable, and they must be deducted to get to net operating income from effective gross income before that net operating income is capitalized. So if you look at my submission, if you look to page 3, there is a quote from the Sauder School of Business Materials about the need to account for non-recoverable expenses, the most important being space marketing costs, which include both tenant inducements and leasing costs, as well as an allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. Down at the bottom of that page, there's a list of items. I'll focus only on a couple by way of mention. Professional fees legal, professional fees other, like audit, for example, or sometimes a building needs an engineer or consultant to look at things, tenant improvements, leasing commissions. These are all items that are recognized. On page 4, I talk about the historic non-recoverable. I've made mention of that already. I won't belabor that. On page 5, the 2020 change, reducing from 7 down to 2. Again, enough on that. Page 6, SAMA, Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. This is the assessor in Saskatchewan. The point I want to make simply is that the manuals they publish note the need to take into account non-recoverable expenses which are not passed on to tenants. Then on page 7, there's a second heading, non-recoverable operating expenses, typically not included in a lease. There's mention of legal and audit, structural repairs, parking lot resurfacing, roof, advertising and promotion to fill vacant space, leasing commission. These are all non-recoverables. MPAC, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, the Ontario assessor, to the same effect, essentially. And if you go on to the next page, page 8, in the middle half of the page, there's a quote of 3 paragraphs long. In the middle paragraph, however, even with a triple net lease, there are expenses that are not necessarily passed on through to the tenant, but are absorbed by the owner. And then they mention a variety of them, including marketing costs, large capital cost projects, legal and audit, and ongoing expenses associated with vacant. And my point to you, simply by drawing this to your attention, is that all of the authorities in the real estate world recognize 2 things. 1, non-recoverable expenses have to be taken into account. The assessor recognizes that as well. Secondly, the types of items that go into that. I know the assessor will not recognize tenant improvements. I know the assessor will not recognize leasing commissions. With respect, I think that is incorrect. I think all the authority recognizes that, including both Ontario and Saskatchewan assessing authorities. What then follows is the copies of all the documents, which I then essentially summarized to you. I'm not going to take you through them. And then the last pages are a non-recoverable expense summary, which we did, which allowed us to address the quantum of the non-recoveries. And we surveyed 17 properties. If we remove the top and bottom 3, we got to a range of 3.25 to 13.21%, and with 7 of the properties concentrated in the 4 to 8% range. So we're asking for the allowance of the 7% non-recoverable, and with that, my submission is complete. And to be clear, I'll not repeat the non-recoverable. I'll ask that it be applied to the subsequent properties as well.
Yeah, we'll take it as applied to subsequent properties. Okay, questions, Mr. Assessor?
Please. What were the actual non-recoverables reported for this property?
In in the 2020 year, they were $119.
What percentage roughly would that be?
A very, very small percentage. I've not calculated it.
And the subject property we're discussing again, this is on a 10-year lease with CIBC, correct?
Yes,
And yet you increased your vacancy from 2% to 4%, was that right?
no, the vacancy is at 2%.
I'm sticking at 2%, okay.
Yes,
Thank you. Did you analyze either of the sales at all, the 2016 or the 2017 sale?
I did not.
Factor it into your valuation that you're coming in about 100,000 under what even the 2016 market value would have been?
Well, the market has changed for the reasons I've articulated over the last 5 years.
No other questions, thank you.
Okay, Bob, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm, the lease term is 10 years. Is that right, Mr. Newman?
It is.
And that was in place during the 2017 sale? Or maybe a better question would be, do you know the terms of that lease?
I believe that lease was in place.
And when would the lease end? Would you know that?
2026.
Okay. My second question, sorry. Was somebody saying something?
No.
Okay. My second question would be, so you've chosen in your, I'm looking at your workup on, we'll call it page 1, I guess. And you've chosen to use the actual net rent in your calculation, but I was looking at the difference between the assessor's workup and your workup for the non-recoverables, and there's only a difference of about $2,200. But I think you attributed the increase, the difference, because of that, the recoverables. Am I misunderstanding that?
So you are correct that the non-recoverable difference is about $2,200.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're asking about the difference in the NOI. So my NOI under my workup is $60,281.
Actually, no. I was looking at the non-recoverables. You've got 7%. The assessor used 3, I believe. The difference there in the workup would be about $2,200. And maybe I misunderstood, but I think your comment was that difference and then an increase in the cap rate made up the difference in the valuation. Am I right or wrong on that? Maybe.
No. I think the difference in the valuation ultimately is a function of 4 things. First of all, the correction of the square footage.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
So that's going to change things immediately.
Of course. Yeah. No, I wasn't asking that. I was zeroing in on the non-recoverable difference, and you commented that made a difference in the NOI of about $6,000 compared to the $7,000 compared to the submitted income and expense statement that the city presented.
So yes, I did make that comment that there is a $7,000 approximately difference.
Okay.
Part of it is found in the non-recoverable, but part of it is also found obviously in the difference in the gross potential income as the starting point because of the square footage.
Of course. Okay. Yeah. 480 square feet difference, I believe.
Yeah.
450. Yeah. Okay. And okay, so you've chosen to use the actual rent, but you've chosen not to use the actual NOI that was submitted by the owner. Can you explain that briefly?
Sure. If all we did was take the NOI submitted, none of us would be here. And I don't mean to sound flippant when I say that, but that's not market valuation. Market valuation always looks to the marketplace, takes into account vacancy. And so that's what I've done. I've looked to what is appropriate rent for this space, considering its age, considering the fact that 30% of the space is in the basement. So that's what I've done. And ultimately, The main differences are the cap rate and the 7% and the 3% once the square footage is corrected.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Newman, for the explanation. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Marcel, questions?
Who did you say did the measurements on the building?
So there's a company called Extreme Measurement and or Extreme Measure, sorry. And they are based on their phone number. They are based in Ontario.
Have you ever seen a building measured this way before? In Manitoba?
Well, when you say this way,
This way, the way they've got it in the diagram. What are they using for their measurement?
interior walls,
Right.
right?
What do we do in Manitoba?
Well, I think the answer is depends on the premises.
I've never seen one measured on interior walls before, unless it's different for rental properties there. But all retail, everything I've ever seen is measured from the outside.
But again, I think it depends on the nature of the property. At the end of the day, the tenant wants to pay rent on what they can use.
That might be how. I'd have to find out if the city is using that same way to measure the building, because if you do the calculation, adding the walls back in, you come up with the city's number.
That's what I've gathered too. I didn't get a chance to review the agent's brief before the hearing today. I can see as well that these are done in as interior measurements both for the main floor and the basement. Especially for a single tenanted building like this, we would use the entire square footage of the building, not an interior measure. So that's
But you would take the staircase off for one.
Because it's
square footage. The square footage would remove the staircases on one level because you can't use it twice.
Potentially, I'd want to double check that, but yeah, the main difference here seems to be the interior versus exterior measure, and we would absolutely use the exterior for a single tenant building like this.
And the other observation I'll make is this is what the parties have agreed to in terms of the rent that will be paid.
That's on the lease itself.
Yes.
Okay. I'm finished with my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to, on your non-recoverable expenses, you list some of the things and you said, if I'm not mistaken, you said leasing commissions and tenant inducements are a large portion of them. Am I correct in that?
They can be at certain points in time, certainly.
Okay, but now in Manitoba, we've had the municipal board indicate quite clearly on a number of occasions that we are not to consider those things in terms of they're not to be used to reduce the value of a property. How do you address that?
Well, so what I would say, Mr. Harden, is that's a big can of worms. And that takes us back to the last go around, the 2020 cycle, where I know the assessor brought forward some decisions from the board and argued that they indicate that leasing commissions should not be taken into account. Actually, I'm not even so sure about the leasing commissions, but they did indicate that inducement should not be taken into account. And part of what I said back then about that issue was it's very important to have in mind how a case is presented to the board, because how it is presented frequently determines what the board concludes. And I'll say to you simply that the weight of the real estate authorities, those who publish the textbooks, those who teach the courses, Saskatchewan, Ontario, they both recognize it. And I don't believe that the municipal board has actually ruled that these things should be ignored. And my submission is they should not.
do you have any decisions from the board in the last cycle on the non-recoverable expenses?
The board has not dealt with this issue since the last cycle.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. No more questions. Is there any summation that either party wishes to do on this property? Mr. Kupfer?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that I think our model value is fair, and it's supported by both arm's length sale prices as well as the comparables that I've submitted.
Okay, Mr. Newman?
I think my submission is clear. I don't think I need anything further.
All right, thank you very much for that. Then we will move on to the next property, which is 270 St. Anne's Road. Let me just open the files.
Next one. Thank you.
Okay, you can proceed, Mr. Kupfer.
That's roll number 0800-201-5500, 270 St. Anne's Road. This is a one-story bank building constructed in 2004 with a leasable area of 5,800 square feet and a 2023 assessment modeled at $2,950,000, which we'll be recommending today. No recent sale history on the property. Scrolling down to page 2 and 3, you can get some good visuals on the subject. Like I said, standalone banks, lots of parking. It looks like it's also got the drive-through as well, which is, I know is desirable. Page 4, or sorry, the bottom of page 3, exact same red comparables table. Like I said, I'll be consistent with this throughout the presentations today. This one, of course, is also on the list. This one falls at the far opposite end of the last property we discussed. They have a net rate in place of $36.70. Page 4 has our modeled workup here. We have the property model at $31.20 net with all of the same modeled variables here: 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall. And for this one, the model came up with a 5.8% capitalization rate, which derives that $2,950,000 value. Page 5 has again the income value summary showing all of those different parameters. Page 6 and 7 discusses cap rates. And as we continue scrolling down, I believe this property is managed by the same property as the last one we discussed, so the INE should look familiar. This property shows net income of $214,000, and like I said, that base rate of $36.70. So again, I believe that our modeled value here is quite fair, quite reasonable, and I'm going to recommend that our 2023 assessment be maintained today. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newman?
So everything on page 4 is model generated, correct?
Correct.
And the capitalization rate, if you look at your page 6, the capitalization rate at 5.8% is below the 20th percentile for all retail categories, correct?
Correct.
And And you made reference to, I guess it's page. So following your page 7, there's a page that says capital property management. There's the questionnaire letter, and then there's the income and expense statement.
Correct.
And you pointed to the net income of $214,000.
And the rate of $36.70. Yes.
And what do you believe the $214,000 should tell us about this property relative to what you've done?
Very little. I'd put more weight on the base rate of $36.70 because it looks like they've included some parking revenue, as well as obviously expenses with their total net operating income here.
And that parking revenue, do you know what property that relates to?
You can see adjoining property to the north.
Right. So my point, and that's a separate role, correct?
Yeah, we're not basing our valuation here on the $215,000 NOI.
No, I understand that, but my point is that the $214,000 NOI includes revenue from another property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And while we're on that page, we do see non-recoverable expenses totaling over $41,000, correct?
Correct.
And I acknowledge some of that is debt service and deferred finance, so we would ignore that. But even leaving that aside, there's near to $20,000 of other non-recoverables, correct?
No, that's not correct. We wouldn't include leasing commissions. I'm not sure what deferred finance charges would fall to. Mortgage interest you would not include as accessible, and neither would.
Right.
So
I thought my question made it clear that we were ignoring deferred finance and mortgage interest. And I was suggesting to you that looking at the balance, that they were near to $20,000, $34.40 for accounting, $558 for legal, $15,861 for leasing commissions, and $96 for bank charges. You acknowledge that that's near to $20,000, correct?
That value, that total number is around $20,000. I was making the point that leasing commissions are not accessible items. Those would be below line items.
That's the department's view. I understand that. Right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcel, any questions?
No questions,
You sound unsure.
from what, no, well, after his questions, I guess I do have. On that piece of property that they're receiving, is there a tax roll on it?
Yeah, it's a separate roll number.
And so they're paying taxes on that property?
That's right.
Would they not have shown that revenue over there?
Oftentimes, when there's when a single property owner and two adjoining properties, they cut corners a bit and just send us one income and expense mailer for the package. And then it's up to us about whether we can break that out or not and still use it for modeling purposes or not.
Okay.
Like I said, in this case, because they give us the net rate that they're paying just for the TD building, we can set aside the total NOI and just say, well, that's the potential income based on the rent that they're paying per foot.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm done.
Okay, Bob, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, I have no questions, so Mr. Newman, you can proceed.
Thank you. So again, I think we now understand what this building is.
Can I ask just beforehand, I looked through your presentation earlier. I didn't see a similar table to the last one you provided. Have you provided such a table?
When you say a table, you mean the spreadsheet capital?
Yes.
Page 46, I hope.
It is.
Oh, page 46. Oh, okay. I didn't look that. Oh, there it is. Never mind. I thought it was just the same attachment as before. Okay, thank you.
All right. So this property, the assessment, as we know, is proposed at $2,950,000. The 2020 assessment was $2,193,000. The proposed cap rate for 2020 was 6.55%. The value of $2,193,000 was our request, which used a 2% vacancy, shortfall, 7% non-recoverable, and a capitalization rate of 7%. Now we're proposed at $2,950,000, which is an increase of $757,000 or 34.51%. I don't think the building has gone up 34.51% in value. So we have a number of issues, and I'm now on to page 3 of my submission, and we have the assessor using a rate of $31.20.
Is that the rent you're talking about?
Yes,
Or isn't he, okay. I might have it wrong.
31.20.
Okay.
So, and I've given you a series of comparables for bank properties of somewhat similar sizes. And a lot of the rents are in the 20s. They're all in the 20s, topping out at $30 a square foot for the site at 115 Vermilion Road, which is the Southdale Shopping Center complex, I'll call it. That collection of retail operators and services. I'm proposing a rate of $29 a square foot based on these comparables. The vacancy, again, my submission here is the same as it was last time. Banks are closing, and so I'm going to leave the vacancy at 2%. If we were treating this as office or retail, the vacancy would be at 5%, but I'm going to leave it at the 2%. But again, I'm going to ask for the adjustment in the capitalization rate. The submission on non-recoverables, same as the last one. And again, I do recognize the position of the department that leasing commission should not be included. My answer simply is that that's not the position of those who write the books, those who teach the courses, and other assessing authorities. Again, I've presented to you the COVID story, and so I won't repeat that. And that takes me through to page 8, where I talk about what are capitalization rates, and I've spoken to this already, investor expectations, the climate, online shopping, which in the banking world means technology and the advent of technology. And again, the capitalization rate used here of 5.8%, if we look at my page 11, is below the assessor's 20th percentile on all types of retail. The market sentiment reflected at page 12 is that people believe capitalization rates are going up, not down. And so at the end of the day, what I've done is I've used $29 a square foot, and I'll show you the spreadsheet in a moment, and that turns into a value of $2,176,000. Continuing to turn the pages, page 19, you've seen this already. It's the Bankers Association statistics on branches closing, pages 20 through 29 through 30. These, again, it's the story of the branches closing. And then at page 28, it then moves into the ever increasing trend to online banking, and the ever growing percentage of consumers who are using online banking services to complete their banking. And so where I get to, if we jump ahead to page 40, the fast facts on the left-hand side of the page. I detailed this for you already in terms of the high and ever-growing percentage of people who are using this technology. And this article is expanded upon in the following pages. But again, more and more and more, the trend is to online banking. Page 45, the listing of the the listing of the West Tova Credit Union building for sale, simply to exemplify the fact that branches are closing. And then page 46, finally, the calculation of value, which uses the $29 rate, the 2% vacancy, the $8 shortfall, the 7% non-recoverable, an NOI of $152,369, and then arriving at a value with a 7% cap of $2,176,000 compared to the $2,950,000 being proposed. Those are my submissions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcel, questions?
Maybe I missed it, but you didn't speak about the other lot and the monies between the two lots. You were questioning that.
Well, my point simply, I thought the assessor was pointing to the $214,000 in the income and expense statement to point to the reasonableness of the assessor's value, which uses an NOI of $171,000. That's what I believe the assessor was doing. And my point in asking him the question was simply to illustrate that there's $50,000 of revenue from another property, which has nothing to do with the subject property that's under appeal today. That was my point in raising those questions.
So you're saying they don't lease that land?
They do lease that land.
So they're the ones renting it out then?
Sorry.
So they're renting it out and making the revenue?
No, the landlord is leasing it out and making the revenue. And the revenue is reported in the single income and expense statement.
What page is that on?
It's in the assessor's brief.
It's in the assessor's brief.
It's after page 7, and it's 1, 2, 3 pages after 7.
Page 7. There's wait. My other question was, you're going for 29. The city's at 3120, and the actual lease is at 3670.
Yes,
Why are we not using the actual on this one? That's what you usually push us for.
because when this building was built, significant inducements were provided, and that's why the rate is where it is.
And when was this lease signed?
It was signed initially in 2004,
And it's going till
2024.
so you're taking the inducements out to bring it down to 29.
I'm reflecting what I'll call a market rent for properties of this type.
Okay. I'm done.
Okay, Bob, any questions?
Yes, my only question is, Mr. Newman, on page 46, what value are you asking the board to revise the assessment to?
$2,176,000.
Would that be rounded up to 2,177,000?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, and I have no questions on this property, so thank you. We will go on to the last property for this appellant is 2567 Main. So, and give me a moment to open the files. Okay, Mr. Kupfer, you can begin.
Is 0500382560 2567 Main Street. This is a one-story bank. The tenant is the Assiniboine Credit Union. It's a newer building built in 2006. And again, a larger building like the last one you discussed with a leasable area of 4,470 square feet and a modeled 2023 assessment of $2,273,000, which we'll be recommending today. Page 2 of my brief shows that there are no recent sales for the subject property. Gives you a nice view of what we're looking at here. So you can see there's quite a bit of parking out back. Multiple entrances. We're on the corner of Main and Red River Boulevard, I believe here. I provided the same rent comparables again to be consistent. This one would fall like the last one we discussed on the higher end as it's a newer, larger building and with quite a bit of space. We've got this one modeled, page 4 of my brief here at $30.13 a foot. And again, all the other parameters the same: 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall. This one has a capitalization rate of 5.6%. Again, it seems like the model is pushing these lower for newer buildings, which derives our estimated market value of $2,273,000. Page 5 of my brief shows that income value summary again for you. Page 6 and 7 have our capitalization rate tables, and then after that we're into the income and expense information. This is not owner occupied again. This is rented out. As far as I know, it's an arm's length lease agreement. This one I believe has a net rent in place of $32.75. I had calculated a while back. Compared to our modeled $30, I believe, or just over $30, which again shows that our this bank is being modeled extremely close to what is actually being reported for net rent. So again, we will be recommending that 2023 assessment be maintained. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. Newman?
Yes. So, and again, looking at page 4 of your brief. So the valuation is model driven, correct?
Correct.
And again, I'd asked you earlier whether there was anything in the model that saw a capitalization rate change. I'm suggesting a decrease based on the size of the property. And so we have this property at 4,470 square feet at a 5.6 cap. And we just did 270 St. Anne's at 5,800 square feet at a 5.8 cap. Do you have any knowledge about the model being structured to generate a lower capitalization rate based on the size of the property?
I can't speak to how the size will impact that, although I would assume that it does play an impact. I can say that the last two buildings that we discussed are also newer buildings, which I would say is also playing an impact into driving that cap rate down.
And then you have a series of attachments to your brief. So following page 7, there's the letter of June 15, 21 from Capital Property Management, the assessment letter of April 15, 21, and then there's a page that provides property income and expense information. You see that?
Yes.
And So you'll note there the advice by the landlord that they provided $525,000 of inducements, correct?
Correct.
And as well, they provided a month's free rent.
That's right.
And I believe you said at some point that there's quite a bit of parking for the property.
Based on my photo there, I commented, yeah, that I think the subject has at least an adequate amount of parking, not a surplus, because there's surrounding parking, it looks like, as well.
But that's on a different property, correct?
No, the subject site has more than adequate parking, as well as there's additional parking on different properties around it.
How many stalls do you believe the subject site has, based on the photo? Approximately.
Approximately 18, 16, 18.
So you're counting, I think, 2 rows essentially.
Yep.
And if I suggest to you that what I'll call the lower row, the one that's away from Main Street, is on a different property, do you accept that?
Yes, I would accept that.
Okay. So the subject property itself appears to have about 6 parking stalls. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that looks correct from this line here.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right, Bob, any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Marcel?
No, my questions have been taken care of. Thank you.
All right, and I have no questions, so you can begin your presentation, Mr. Newman.
Thank you. So I'm on page 2. And so let me just speak for a moment to the questions I've been asking about the model and whether it makes a distinction between capitalization rates based on size. In my experience, having been here for more than a few years, certainly it used to be the case that the city had a break point or a threshold, if you will, of 5,000 square feet. If you were below 5,000 square feet, there was as much as a 1% difference in the capitalization rate compared to if you were above 5,000 square feet. And so what I've been trying to ascertain is the city still using a breakpoint based on size for determining capitalization rates? Because these 2 properties we've just dealt with, one is 5,800 square feet, 270 St. Anne's. The subject property is 4,470 square feet. One built 2004, the other built 2006. So I don't think there's any practical difference in their age. And yet there's a 20 basis point difference in the capitalization rates proposed between the 2. I don't accept the rate, as you've heard from me, but I that's why I was asking the questions, just so the panel will understand. So having said that, the 2020 assessment of this property was $1,632,000. The 2023 assessment is proposed at $2,273,000. That's an increase of $641,000 or 39.27%. So we've got a number of issues here. We've got the issue of the rental rate at $30.12. I've used $29. I've given you at the bottom of page 2 and onto the top of page 3 a set of comparables, putting the rates in the range in the high 20s essentially, and I've selected $29. On the vacancy, again, same presentation. Banks are closing, branches are reducing. I'm going to leave the vacancy at 2%, but I'm going to ask that that be taken into account when we address the capitalization rate. Non-recoverable expenses, again, the same submission you've been receiving from me. And then on the capitalization rate, again, we're going to come into the same conversation. Is this retail? Is this office? The evolving nature of what's going on in the banking world. We've gone from a 7% capitalization rate to a 5.6% capitalization rate on this property, which is the primary cause of the increase of some 39%. Or $641,000, not exclusively, but it's a significant contributor. So I'm again saying to you that this property is more of a retail type property. And we know that the city capitalization rates on retail are not less than, bear with me, not less than 6% at the 20th percentile for a strip mall. This is a freestanding property. Banks aren't always the most amenable to an alternate use. They frequently have vaults. There's often not a good use for a vault. So there's some obsolescence associated with the properties. And so ultimately, when we get to page 52, I'm using the $29 rate, the 2% vacancy, the $8 shortfall, the 7% non-recoverable, creating a net operating income of $117,429, which I am then capitalizing at 7%. Those are my submissions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
No, thank you.
Did you say no questions?
No, thank you. No questions.
Okay, I didn't catch that. Marcel, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Bob, questions?
I guess, yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is, Mr. Newman, on your page 18, that photo, it's showing regarding the parking spaces. It appears that the developer allowed, or the owner of that shopping center allowed them to build, I'll call it the secondary parking lot, with a curbing, landscaping, and an entrance to utilize a larger parking area. Any comments on that?
So you're right. It appears that that is the case. Of course, what we are dealing with here is the willing buyer and the willing seller. And so my observation would simply be that when you have your own parking on your own lot, you fully control it. You're not subject to any agreements with any third parties. As soon as you no longer have control of your parking, the risk changes immediately and it becomes somewhat riskier. And that's part of the reason why we're seeking an increase in the capitalization rate.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Right, I'm going to have a question. When you state that this is more akin to retail rather than office, would not the best alternative use be as an office? I mean, most of the area currently is probably office, but you are correct in terms of there's usually a vault there. But wouldn't office be the most comparable rate?
So the problem with the way some of these branches are designed, and Assiniboine Credit Union, I think, is an example of that, where they've made a bit of, I'll call it an architectural statement, soaring ceilings. They haven't built boxes, so to speak. And so the interior of these spaces then becomes a little bit more difficult to demise. I'm not saying that it's not usable as office. Everything is adaptable. Almost everything is adaptable to another use. It's a question of how much money you have to spend. But could it be office? Of course it could. Could it be retail? That might be a more appropriate use considering its visibility.
Okay, thank you on that. That's my questions. All right, so now that Mr. Newman has finished his properties, we'll take a 10-minute break to 2:40 and then come back with the remaining properties on today's agenda. So 10-minute break. Thank you very much for your
Thank you to the
presentation.
panel. Thank you to the panel.
Such a gentleman.
We are live.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to order. The next property on the agenda is 1275 Grant. Belen, can you swear in Mr. Smith?
Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Trevor Smith,
And you affirm the evidence you present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, 1275 Grant, Mr. Kupfer, you can begin.
1375 grand.
Oh, sure. 1375.
Presentation.
I'm down the street. I'm down the street.
Grand. That's roll number 1204112000001375 Grant Avenue. This is owner occupied by the Carpathia Credit Union. Constructed in 2013. It's all on one story, 3,300 square feet. Leasable area and a 2023 modeled assessment of $1,798,000, which we'll be recommending today. We have no recent sales for the property, at least since the building's been built, but on page 2 and page 3, looking at the photos, you can get a good idea. It's a very nice building. It's got parking space around the side there. It's got the drive-through ATM and all those little amenities, which are really nice and you get with these standalone bank buildings. Page 3 of my brief is the same comparable chart that I've been submitting all afternoon for you. Again, these are all standalone banks located throughout the city. Banks do tend to rent quite well. They tend to sign longer leases. The average that I came up with here is just under $25 a foot, with a min-max of around $15 to $36. The subject property, unsurprisingly, based on the size and age and location, is being modeled at $30.83 a foot. As it's owner occupied, we have no rents, so we have nothing to compare that to other than the market. All the other parameters here are the same you've been seeing today. These are all standard for our bank modeling. That's 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall, and this one has a capitalization rate of 5.35%, which again, I would posit is likely being pushed lower due to the age of the building. Page 5 of my brief has the income value summary, again showing that estimated market value $1,798,000. Page 6 and 7 has those capitalization rate tables, again all standard coming from our model. And then I've attached the income and expense mailer just to confirm for you that it is fully owner occupied, and we have no site-specific income to use for this evaluation, so we are relying on market evaluation. And like I said, they'll be recommending that $1,798,000 today. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes, just a few. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at page number 3 of the submission, the comparable number 4, I believe, 270 St. Anne's, that was the property that was just dealt with earlier in the hearing here today. Is that correct? The TD Bank property?
One of the properties we discussed, yes.
Okay. And the appellant had noted that there was significant tenant inducement included in the face rate that is derived at 3670. Is that correct?
You did note that, yes.
Okay. The capitalization rate for the subject property here, so 5.35%. Is that a decrease from the prior cycle?
I can't
You're
say.
aware?
I'm not aware.
Okay. We don't have that data.
No, I don't have the previous work.
Okay. When I look at page 6 of the city's submission there, and as banks are classified under retail here, when I look at the 20th and 80th percentiles, obviously there's no specific categorization for banks, but the lowest that I see here is 6%. So we're going on over half a point, 0.65% lower than the 20th percentile here. Is that purely based on age? The property being a bit newer?
I would say age, size, and location are the primary drivers for that.
So if we had a bank in the same location, but it was built in 1984, we would have a different modeling?
I believe the capitalization rate specifically would likely have come out higher. The expenses, vacancy, and shortfall, I think, would all be the same.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcel, questions?
No question.
Bob, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 1375 Grant Avenue, this is a owner-occupied property. Carpathia Credit Union is the owner and occupant. Property is a bit newer. It was built in 2013. The site was a former gas bar that the property was, that was the use of the property prior to the current on-site use. And you can see in the city's material the transaction there back in 2010 for the gas bar. Now, let's look at my page number 3 for a bit of a summary. When we look at the 2023 assessment, it has been increased to $1,798,000. This is an increase of 43.4% over, or $544,000 over the 2020 assessment. And if you look at the 2020 assessment, you can see that that was reduced at the Board of Revision from $1,901,000 to $1,254,000. The site area that we're looking at, just over 16,000 square feet. So under half an acre, and leasable area of 3,300 square feet. The photographs of the subject property are shown, the exteriors on page 4 and 5. And you can get a sense of the structure from that. We don't go into detail with regard to build out, etc. Property is located on the corner of Waverly and Grant. So Waverly at that location is a one-way street heading south. And Grant obviously is two-way traffic with a meridian in the middle. Access heading eastbound on Grant to this particular site is not possible. You have to do a U-turn, so access is a bit restrictive in that manner. And the location of the property itself is shown on page 7, as you can see, right at the corner of Waverly and Grant. Let's move on from there to the valuation of the property. As you've already heard from Mr. Newman in his presentation earlier, we are looking at bank and credit union facilities here today. Obviously, there has been an evolution in that industry in the last number of years, both in terms of technology and clients no longer requiring a bricks and mortar location to go and do their banking, and a significant majority of people doing their banking without ever setting foot in a bank. This has obviously driven the banks to reconsider their requirement for bricks and mortar for physical locations, and we've seen significant reduction in the number of community located banks within Winnipeg and indeed within Canada, both from national banks as well as from credit unions as well. That is a bit of background prior to looking at the actual market information with regard to lease rates, rental rates in the market. Subject property is owner occupied, so we have no arm's length lease in place. So we look at the market for direction as far as arriving at a fair net rental rate for the subject property. So my chart of comparables is shown on page 10. These vary somewhat in location, but dominantly here we're in the southwest of Winnipeg, as is the subject. Our first comparable, comparable number 1, 1700 Corridon. This is an RBC location. Property originally built in 1989. And we have a little over 6,100 square feet there. We have a lease starting in 2017 on a 5-year term at $24 a square foot. Excellent location in the heart of River Heights, $24 a square foot. 2020 Corridon, number 2, little under 6,000 square feet, 5,888, similar age. And we have a lease with an original start date of 2002, obviously with steps occurring over time, with a rental rate as of the valuation date at $19 a square foot. This is a TD location, and that is located directly across from Tuxedo Shopping Center. So again, a premier location in terms of visibility and draw for retail as well as banks. Number 3, 5128 Roblin, again, excellent location in Charleswood. 2019 lease at $14.50 a square foot on a 5-year term. This is an RBC. And we can run through each of these. What I'll point your attention towards, I guess, in relation to the subject properties, the subject property being a bit newer, built in 2013, is let's look at comparables 4 and 6 in our chart, because they're the most recently constructed comparables. So comparable number 4, 1210 St. Mary's. This is an Assiniboine credit union. Built in 2012, the start date in 2013, obviously with steps, and we have a rental rate of $31.50 a square foot at that location in St. Vital. Built in 2012, subject being 2013. The next one I would point your attention to is number 6, 1570 Kenniston. So this is located in the big box conglomerate at the corner of Kenniston and McGilvery, with the various power center developments surrounding that particular intersection. One of the premier retail locations in the city. We have a construction date of 2005 and a lease starting in 2011 at $23 a square foot, again, for another bank. Now, subject is well located in the River Heights area. I've described its location to you. And when we look at the comparables from the area, as well as the most recent comparables and some of the issues with the site, I would suggest that it would draw a net rental rate of about $28 a square foot on the open market, based on our analysis. We can move on from the revenue side to expenses. I know you gentlemen on the panel have all heard discussion on expense allowance, so I will try and keep my summary relatively short. Prior to that, let's look at the expense at the issue of vacancy with regard to bank and credit union buildings. We look at the top of my page 11, refer to the Johnson report, which we're all familiar with. Year-end 2020, the Johnson report states strip center retail vacancy being at 4.5%, up from 3.9% in 2017. So that is in the, rather 2019, pardon me. That is in the period of COVID. You can see the lift in vacancy that they note in that time frame, with an overall retail vacancy rate of 5.4%. Now, banks in particular aren't tracked in the Johnson report or by other market participants such as commercial brokerages. They don't particularly track them. However, as I've discussed already, we are looking at an evolution in the banking and financial industry where the need for bricks and mortar locations has considerably lessened, and you see extensive shuttering of bank branches on major thoroughfares. If we look at Pembina Highway, for instance, there were, I'm going to forget each individual branch, but there were a number of branches just south of the Jubilee interchange down to McGilvery, where RBC is located. Older branches that each of the main Canadian banks has closed in recent years. Mr. Newman has mentioned many others that I'm familiar with. Scotiabank has had a considerable restructuring in terms of their number of locations, as have some of the other branches, other banks as well. So the 2% that the city of Winnipeg is allowing for vacancy for banks, we don't necessarily feel that that is appropriate as far as vacancy for this particular property type. Perhaps the feeling at one point was that banks were kind of the gold standard that you didn't need to worry about. That may have been true at one point, but it no longer is. 2% in any type of commercial category is an extremely minimal vacancy allowance. So while we are going to acknowledge and use the 2% in our valuation, the reason we're doing that is we're looking at the overall value of the property and incorporating that issue into the selection of the capitalization rate for our valuation as well. So we don't necessarily support the 2%, but we have not changed that particular parameter. The issue of expense allowance has been discussed at length already by another appellant. I have my own thoughts on it, which are dominantly the same. I will keep my presentation brief, as you've all heard it in the past. Suffice it to say, the City of Winnipeg has changed their modeling essentially between the 2018 cycle and the 2020 cycle, where we saw a reduction in the overall expense allowance from a total of 7% to 2% in the 2020 cycle and 3% in the 2023 cycle. The issue that we're looking at here, of course, is non-recoverables and what should and should not be included. As Mr. Newman had noted, the industry experts, accredited experts, indicate that there is a basis for the inclusion of these expenses in the determination of the net operating income. So if we look at my page 11, I quote the Appraisal Institute of Canada. You can see the text in the middle of the page there from the standard appraisal textbook. And we look at the development of the net operating income. And within that definition, they refer specifically to expenses paid by the landlord. Now, what are these expenses meant to be? Well, that is where the discrepancy between the city and the experts in the industry arises. When we look at my text on page 11, the non-recoverable expenses are intended to be expenses that are incurred by most properties. They serve to reduce the overall net operating income. They include such things as professional fees, as already noted, legal, accounting, audit. We have asset management, which is in dispute by the city. We have landlord work. We have leasing commissions, which is disputed by the city. We have tenant improvements. We have tenant inducements, which would be items such as free rent, etc. We have marketing of the property. We have owner repair and maintenance, exclusive of structural repair, credit checks, property management fees. In some cases, these are excluded in leases. Typically, that is included, but in some cases, such as with government leases, that can be excluded from inclusion. So these are the categories that we're looking at. I conducted a 3-year historical review of properties running between 2016 and 2018, broke it down into 2 categorizations where we include the TI and where we don't include the TI. We looked at between 45 and 53 properties. These were all tenanted properties, investment properties that we had full access to the information on. And as you can see, our resultant averages are shown in the chart on page number 12. And we're looking at 3-year averages of between 11.5% and 12.7%. Now, this is taken directly from the material that would be available to the city as well, as this is all submitted in the income and expense information submitted to the city on an annual basis. We're not looking to change that original figure of 7% to a higher figure, though that is supported. We're simply looking for the reinstitution of the 7%. Beyond that, shortfall allowance, we're not in dispute with the city on, and we can move on to capitalization rate. Now, cap rate of 5.35%, again, falls below the city of Winnipeg's 20th percentile by a significant margin. While the age of the building may have something to do with that, it seems to be a bit driven by the use of the building as well as a bank and or credit union. So let's look at this. If the property were to be traded on the market, a lease would need to be put in place, etc. But you then also have the situation where the tenant has the ability to leave at the end of the lease that they would then sign on sale of the building, it being owner occupied right now. So it's essentially a sale leaseback. Now, if consolidation continues apace and the proliferation of IT in the world, people using their laptops, phones, etc., to do nearly everything these days, that need for space is going to decrease further. And frankly, putting a premium on a cap rate for a property of this type is probably not appropriate. So what does the market tell us with regard to capitalization rates? Well, nothing specifically regarding banks, but when we look at main commercial brokerages, Cushman and Wakefield and CB Richard Ellis, they give us capitalization rate ranges in their studies for investment grade retail assets at the appropriate time frame. We get a range of 6.5% to 7.25% for non-anchored retail strip malls. So what do we have here? Not a multi-tenant facility, single tenant, that increases your risk. We have certainly non-anchored. When we look at this particular property, I can think there's a small strip mall to the west of this, and a couple of other office buildings in the area, but then it's dominantly either apartment and or single family in that particular area. Let's look at the sales that are available to us for the relevant time frame as well. My capitalization rate study is shown on page number 13. These are transactions prior to the valuation date based on the in-place income and expense. So they are true capitalization rates. They're not imputed based on potential rents, etc. Our first transaction, 1411 Henderson, transaction in 2021. And we have a capitalization rate of 8.9% on that particular sale. That's well into the COVID timeframe, as you can see. Photo of that property is shown underneath the chart on page 13. You can see the tenancies there. Second property located in Osborne Village. It's a strip mall as well as a street front retail location. 2018 sale at a cap rate of 7.5%. Finally, we have 1800 Corridon. This is a relatively newly constructed strip mall in the River Heights area, just east of Keniston Boulevard, so very well located. We have a 2019 transaction there at a cap rate of 7%. The photo of that is shown on page number 14. So certainly a newer property, well located, kind of boutique tenancies in that particular property. So our range that we're looking at in the sales shown is between 7% and 8.9%. When I look at the subject property in comparison to these, obviously it is well located, significantly smaller at 3,300 square feet. It is relatively new. These are positives in its favor. So we do see a slight decrease from the bottom end of our range at 7% being appropriate for the subject property. And we have applied a capitalization rate of 6.5% in our analysis. Now, 6.5% is at the bottom end of both Cushman Wakefield and CB Richard Ellis's capitalization rate ranges for the appropriate time frame. We look at my page number 14, you can see a summary of our valuation compared to the city of Winnipeg's. Again, we differ on rental rates. I've discussed the vacancy issue, which is also taken into account in the selection of the cap rate for the subject property. And using our cap rate of 6.5%, you can see our final valuation comes to $1,287,000. The addendum materials include the income and expense submitted, the decision from the last cycle, which was based on the valuation of the appellant. And then at the very back, we have a discussion with regard to the issues that the COVID pandemic has created for commercial real estate in Winnipeg. This is an article taken from 2020. And if we look at the very back page, the discussion here is regarding the retail market. The quotes here are taken from Wayne Johnson, the publisher of the Johnson Report. And as you can see, he discusses the issues with the retail sector, stating that it has particularly hurt the retail sector due to leases ending, bankruptcies, inability of retailers to pay, etc. This has certainly been a widespread issue. So we have increasing vacancy and challenges collecting rent as well. I'll leave that there for you to review, but it is important as well, as has already been mentioned, to consider the time frame that we're operating within in arriving at these valuations. So April 1, 2021, we're right in the deepest part of COVID. Extremely few transactions happening in the marketplace, both in terms of tenants leasing space, as well as any sales or purchases of retail properties as well. That is my presentation, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
Thank you. Did you review the last 2 pages of my brief here, the COVID questionnaire?
Of your brief?
Yes.
I see it, yes.
Okay. You can confirm that it shows that the owner of the property reported that COVID had not impacted the operations of the property?
I do see that that is what they've completed. I guess my commentary with regard to that is you're looking at completion of this form by the owner occupant, and they're looking at, you know, what was their cost. Well, they had to get some stickers to show you where to line up, how far apart to go into the bank. They had to provide more hand sanitizer, supply masks, et cetera, et cetera. So those would be the direct costs that they would be looking at. They're obviously an owner occupant, so they're not going to have that particular issue. But we're looking at valuation of the property, not the operation of the bank or credit union itself.
Your 3 capitalization rate comparables, these are all retail strip mall properties, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You mentioned a few things that Mr. Newman had said. Were you present for our first property this morning, 739 Henderson?
I was, yes.
Okay. So you were there when I demonstrated that property transacted with a 6% cap rate in 2017 as a standalone bank?
I don't have any access to that particular information, and I haven't reviewed it, so I really can't comment on that. Again, it's not information that's in before us here today either.
Thank you. No other questions.
Okay, Marcel, any questions?
No, no questions.
Okay, Bob, any questions?
Yes, please, two quick ones. Mr. Smith, page 10, I'm looking at your comparisons of market leasing activity. And my question is, can you detail which ones are freestanding banks or credit unions?
Which of them are freestanding?
Yes. Not in a strip mall.
1210 St. Mary's is a freestanding one. And I'm not sure about 135 McPhillips, whether that is a freestanding one or not. Part of our issue here with getting appropriate rental comparables in the marketplace as well is that consolidation of bank branches in the marketplace. Dominantly, if we have freestanding bank and or credit union, by and large, they're owned by the bank or credit union. They're not leased. There are some exceptions, as Mr. Kupfer has noted here, but for the most part, they would be owner occupied. So there are less of those than locations within strip malls.
Okay. And my last question is, I'm looking at page 5, pardon me. The subject property has does it have drive-through banking?
It does have a drive-through, yes.
Okay. In your opinion, does that warrant an adjustment in the cap rate compared to a strip mall where you'd have to walk to the bank?
No. As I noted earlier, we're looking at a single tenancy situation here for the subject property. When we look at a strip mall, by its very nature, they're multi-tenanted. So we have a significantly different risk profile and investment profile for a strip mall.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm going to turn to your page 12, your table there, non-recoverable expenses. Now you've taken out tenant inducements. Do you have a similar calculation with leasing commissions taken out?
You mean subsequent to 2018?
Well, yeah, with this table, I mean, you've got no tenant inducements. Now, do you have a similar table with no leasing commissions?
No, I do not. As leasing commissions should be included in that particular calculation. We run through my text on pages 11 and 12 describes the basis for it and the particular line items that should be included in non-recoverables, and that includes leasing commissions. This is, again, agreed to by the main industry teachers, essentially, that being Appraisal Institute of Canada, as well as other assessing authorities. I did not go to the extent of providing other jurisdictions calculations with regard to this, but I do understand that they are in agreement as well.
Well, the issue, of course, we have here is that the senior board, the municipal board, has very emphatically said you can't include leasing commissions.
So I'm going to speak to that if I could, and I don't, of course, have that material presented here today, neither does the assessor, but there is one main particular case that's always brought forward by the city of Winnipeg. And I can't quote the property address, etc., but I've seen it many times. And in the decision there, and in the presentation of the case, the appellant was stating that the subject property had significant tenant inducements, or rather tenant improvements that were applied to the property when the tenant went in. So they built the space out for them. And as is common in the retail industry, that amount of investment by the owner is included in the rental rate, and it pushes the rental rate up. Now, what the appellant was looking to do was to bring that face rate, which includes the tenant improvement, down to what it would net out to. So they were looking to reduce the income of the property. We're not looking at the same issue here with regard to non-recoverable costs. We're not looking to adjust the income of the property. We're demonstrating that the non-recoverable costs that an owner would bear include those tenant improvements. So we're not changing the income, we're properly representing it where it belongs in the non-recoverable.
But I mean, it still amounts to reducing the net operating income, does it not?
Not in the way that the decision that the board describes it. They were describing reduction of the income, not the, or call it revenue, rather than the net income. I can't be any clearer, as can the other appellants, with regard to the basis for the inclusion of these costs being supported by the main industry experts, both in terms of education as well as other assessing jurisdictions.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, could I get one more question in?
Sure, go ahead.
I meant to ask it and I forgot. Is it under, is the last decision under appeal right now?
I'm afraid I don't know that. I don't believe so, but
We're usually told when they are, so.
Mr. Chairman, I have 3 different municipal board orders here, all reiterating the same thing regarding tenant inducements and leasing commissions.
this is not a question.
I don't include them as part of our brief because we shouldn't need to include them as part of our brief because they're municipal board orders. So I don't think that should be a point of contention to allow this type of argument.
Okay.
I didn't answer my question. Did the city appeal the last one?
If I could follow up on that, what I would point out is this is a very significant point of contention, and we are awaiting scheduling of essentially test cases at the municipal board to proceed through this matter. So there will be decisions coming down. It simply hasn't arrived yet. The decisions that the city is referring to are from a considerable time ago.
Yes, I'm quite familiar with those decisions in the past. Okay, did you get your question answered, Marcel?
Nobody seems to know there's an appeal on it, so I guess it's not appealed.
Oh, yes, that's true. It was on appeal. All right. Let's move onwards and upwards then, or northwards and
Northwards?
to 310 Leela Avenue.
That's northwards.
All right, on 310 Leela Avenue, Mr. Cooper, you can begin.
One moment here. Okay, that is roll number 110301930000, 310 Leela Avenue. This is again a Carpathia Credit Union owner-occupied property. It is 1 story, constructed in 2000, so again a little bit newer. 6,112 square feet of leasable area, and a 2023 modeled assessment of $2,063,000, which we'll be recommending today. No recent sales, fortunately, to go off of for this one. Like the other banks that we've discussed, as you can see in the photos, this is a larger standalone type building. They do have one tenant in place in this building. As you can see, we have two income streams. We have our bank stream, and then we have an OFS stream. So our first stream here on page 4 is the OFS stream. Standard finish, just over 1,000 square feet, and a modeled rate of $15.34. As you can see, the parameters are different. These would be our modeled office suburban parameters. So the vacancy is higher, the expenses are the same, the shortfall is the same, and the capitalization rate is actually even a bit lower on this one at 4.95%, giving a total value for this smaller office stream of $293,000. Page 5 shows the bank stream. This is obviously the primary tenant and owner, Carpathia, 5,038 square feet. Net rate of $21.61, and the same model parameters that you've been seeing all afternoon today. Add the two streams together and you get our model 2023 assessment of $2,063,000. This is, like I said, partially owner occupied. They did provide the rent of the tenant, which I believe worked out to $16 net per foot, and we're modeling it at just over $15. So it seems like the model is doing a pretty good job on this one. And again, we're going to be recommending that value of $2,063,000. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, just briefly. So capitalization rate for the bank portion of the property shown as 5.8%. That again would be under the 20th percentile, would it not?
Yes.
Okay. And then it's a small portion of the valuation, so I don't want to dwell on it, but 4.95% capitalization rate for the office portion. So when I flip to office, the lowest we're looking at here is 5.6% for the 20th percentile, suburban A and B, no distinction there in the city's information. So I'm going to venture that the 4.95% in the model is probably impacted by the size of the space that we're looking at. Is that correct? 1,074 square feet.
Certainly a determining factor, yes.
Now it's breaking this income stream out as a valuation of its own versus being in the overall property of 6,000 plus square feet. Would it not seem that a cap rate of 4.95% on 1,000 square foot single tenant within a larger property would seem a tad aggressive?
That's certainly on the lower end.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Marcel?
No, other than this is an office and then a bank. That's correct. I just want to make sure I got this right.
It's a bank with a small office in it.
So with the bank with a small office in it. So the bank is leasing out the office. Is that correct?
Correct. The owner, Carpathia Credit Union, is running a Carpathia Credit Union and also leases a small office to, I believe it's a medical tenant, Dr. George Stolarski, seeing on the income and expense.
Okay. We'll carry on.
Okay, Bob, questions?
Yes, my only question is, what would be the blended lease rate you're using?
Blended lease rate, give me 30 seconds. $19.99, $20 a foot.
Okay, thank you very much. My only question,
The question I have on this, there's only one property title, is there not, on this property?
I believe it's just one title, yes.
So you're not going to be able to sell the office separately. So wouldn't a buyer then tend to look at an overall cap rate and not look at an office rate of being per se?
Yeah, so I think my page 6 there, the blended income stream, kind of represents what our model is showing that a market representation would be, both in terms of that rate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can we come back 1 second? Is there a separate entrance for that doctor's office?
Let's have a look.
I do know the answer.
I just don't see it.
I'm not able to determine that from my my Google view here.
Okay, well, maybe we'll get it from the account.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Smith, then you can begin.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. So property we're looking at is a Carpathia Credit Union. I'll get you to flip to my page number 6 and 7. So we have the site description shown on page 6, giving you the aerial of the property. It is located at the corner of Leela and Salter, to the west of Main Street. Obviously, significantly different than our past property in River Heights. The front page of my brief will give you frontage property from Leela itself. I believe that is, yes, and give you an impression of the structure itself. It is a bank building that has a single tenant in it. My understanding is that they're not marketing space for lease in this building. There's a cultural association here. They were approached and they've accommodated a tenant in a very small portion of the building. 1,074 square feet. They do have a separate entrance, I believe, for that space on the east side where the parking lot is located. So for all intents and purposes, it is a bank building. That tenant may remain there, they may not remain there. We're looking at a single investment entity that would be treated as such by a purchaser. They would not break out the office portion for this particular tenant and capitalize it based on it being 1,000 square foot office building, essentially. Let's look at my page number 3. Some background. 2023 assessment, $2,063,000. This is a 36.4% increase, $550,000 over the 2020 assessment, which was reduced at the board. We don't believe this is representative of market value for this property in the 2023 cycle. Property was originally built in 2000, and we have overall leasable area there for you. Photographs of the property are shown on pages 4 and 5. Again, that small tenancy that we're talking about is located on the east side of the building. So certainly different than the other Carpathia location that we were looking at previously. Let's move on to the valuation. What would be appropriate for the subject property in terms of rental rate? Now, I've already presented my bank rate comparables. when we looked at the net rental rate that City of Winnipeg applies to the bank portion of this particular property, credit union portion, we felt that it was appropriate. We have an owner-occupied property here, so we have nothing, no arm's length in-place lease to refer to. Let's look at the location in comparison to both my comparables as well as the city. Certainly, the $19 a square foot. Hold on just a moment here, make sure I'm referring to the correct portion here. Rather, the $21.61 per square foot for the credit union portion of the building, we felt is appropriate. The tenanted portion, 1,074 square feet, they actually have a gross lease rate of $21.59 a square foot, which roughly netted out to about $19 per square foot. Now, we've applied $19 a square foot to it. If you look at our rental rates in comparison to the city, I believe we're higher with regard to that particular tenancy simply based on their in-place rate. Is that too high? It might be, but I don't want to discount what's in place either. Our commentary with regard to vacancy remains the same, as well as the expense allowance discussion. We won't cover that twice. And the City of Winnipeg shortfall, again, we're not disputing in our valuation. Now, capitalization rate. We have the same information as already discussed on page 13. As an investor looking at a purchase of this property, you're not looking at different income streams and capitalizing them separately. You're looking at purchase of the property as a whole, not a blended rate. You're looking at, pardon me. You're looking at your return that's required. You're looking at market evidence with regard to other transactions, and you're looking at all of the factors that you need to take into account, financing, etc., as of that time frame. So our market evidence remains the same. We're looking at trades of strip malls, 7.5% dominantly, one at the high end, obviously at 8.9%. Well located, well tenanted strip malls at that rate. Each of these properties would be superior to the subject in terms of location, in terms of the quality of the tenants in place, etc. And our range, as quoted by the commercial brokerages, is 6.5% to 7.25%. Again, for non-anchored strips, which we're not here. So, what would be an appropriate cap rate for the subject? We're looking at a standalone credit union building. We felt that conservatively, very conservatively, a cap rate of 7% would be an appropriate capitalization rate. And as already discussed, that would be applied to the whole building, so both income streams. The summary of our valuation is shown on page 15. I will point out that we've broken it out into the two different components, but that the cap rate does remain the same. Summarizing our value, adding the $247,000 of value from the office component to the credit union component, we arrive at a final market value of $1,653,000, a significant jump from the 2020 assessment. And our addendum materials include the income and expense, as well as material already discussed. And I'm open for questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
No questions.
Okay, Bob, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And Marcel?
No questions.
Okay, so we will move to item 7 then, 952 Main Street. I think I got the address right this time.
Mhm.
Okay, you can begin, Mr. Kupfer.
Is rule number 14001020100952 Main Street. Again, owned and occupied by the Carpathia Credit Union, or at least partially so. This is a bit of an older building, constructed in 1975. It's 3 stories in height, with 18,658 square feet on file as leasable area, and a 2023 model assessment of $2,203,000. This property is a little bit different from the other banks that we've been discussing today. Built a lot more like an office property, as you can see. It does have a banking component in it, but as well some office space. So you have the bank comparables that I've submitted for you on every property to date, and then I've also included these OFS comparables that are. I couldn't say I could find a great one for one, so I just kind of gave you a good sampling here of OFS properties in the area. With an average rental rate of about $14.27 per foot and a min-max of about $10 to $20. Page 3 of my brief, or sorry, page 4 of my brief shows the income stream here. So like I said, a mixture of standard office finish as well as that bank credit union section at 5,312 square feet. If we want to average this out, that would be 258, 265 by 18,658 square feet. Be $13.84 on average. We're assigning to this. The building has a 15% modeled vacancy here, so we are accounting for the fact that there's so many different units. Vacancy would likely be higher. Expenses are at 3%. Shortfall at $8, as we've seen all day, and then the capitalization rate is also quite a bit higher for this property at 8.65%, which derives our value of $2,203,000. Page 5 again has an income value summary, just the one stream here. Property type class is OFS, as I mentioned. Income and expense mailer was provided further down in my brief. Like I said, it is partially owner occupied. Carpathia Credit Union is the owner, and then I believe they lease some of these spaces out. And yeah, that's all the information I've got on this one. So like I said, we are going to recommend that modeled assessment be maintained today. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, just briefly. So the rental comparables on page 3, is it fair to say it's quite challenging to find any office comparables on Main Street from downtown, north of downtown?
Yeah, I think when I remember looking, as you can see, is mostly more on the Henderson side than on the main side there on the other side of the river.
Right. So when I look at the comparables and the addresses, with the exception of Notre Dame at the bottom there, each of these would be located on the east side of the red in the Kildonans along Henderson, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And when we look at the comparables here, the square footage, generally we're looking at relatively small spaces here. Again, fair to say that economies of scale come into play with regard to the rental rates that are achieved on small spaces versus, say, full floor, etc. of the subject property.
Yeah, I would say higher rent per foot, and with that also comes the higher vacancy percentage.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcel, questions?
I think I heard his question. Did you say that the square footage was less cost per square foot on the larger one?
No, I said the rent per foot generally scales higher for smaller spaces.
Right. And yet these ones are all lower than the other space, the large space.
That's because that one is a bank, and banks generally rent for higher than office spaces do, as we've seen based on the comparables and the subjects that we've looked at today.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, Bob. Questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, I have some questions based on location of this building. It's probably a challenging location. Would that be fair to typify it as that?
I'm not sure how I'd qualify this location.
Okay, just looking at some of the photographs there, your front view there appears to be a broken window in on beside the door there. At least it's plywooded over. Would it be fair to say that the location makes it a little bit less desirable for a little bit more challenging to rent out office space and that sort of thing?
I think, like the agent pointed out, it's difficult to find Main Street office comparisons in this area, and that there would likely be a slight downward adjustment from the Henderson side over to the Main Street side in terms of rent comparables.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then those are my questions. So, Mr. Smith, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So once again, 952 Main Street. This is Carpathia Credit Union head office. It's located at the corner of Main and Flora in just north of downtown. And if you look at my cover page there, you can get an image of the front of the building. Built in 75, very typical of that time frame, kind of that brutalist architecture, or whatever that, I believe that's the correct terminology. Hopefully we have no architects sitting on the panel, but my understanding that is a good representation. When we look at this stretch of Main Street, obviously it is different than the others that we've been looking at here today. It is a challenged area in terms of being economically disadvantaged, and a lot of the social challenges that are in place there. You need only look at the cover page of my report, and the building just to the north on the right-hand side of the photo is occupied by pawn traders, a significant number of pawn stores in the area, as well as beverage hotels, etc. It is an area that is known to be economically disadvantaged. Now, let's move into my brief, page number 3, just very brief summary. Built in 75, overall leasable area of 18,658 square feet, according to the city. We have a floor plate of roughly plan area of 6,969 square feet. So the main floor of the property, and I'm not sure if it occupies the entire main floor of the property, but the main floor of the property is retail location for Carpathia Credit Union. And then the upper floors are office space. So we're looking at roughly 2 floors of just under 7,000 square feet of office space full floors, not demised as the into separate tenant spaces with appropriate hallway demising, etc., in order to split it out. These are full floors of office space occupied by an owner occupant. So when we look at appropriate rental rates, we should be looking at sizes of a similar size in terms of market examples of rents for office space that would be considered comparable. Let's quickly look at photos. Page number 4 gives you 2 photos of the exterior. The site is shown on page 5, again, main at Fora, and the map giving you the location is shown on page number 6. So we're looking at that area just north of the CPR tracks, an underpass on the west side of Main Street in what's referred to as Lord Selkirk Park, adjacent to Point Douglas. So that is our location. Let's move forward into the valuation itself. If we look at the income and expense mailer at the back, I would say similarly, but on a different basis to the property that we were just looking at in Leela, Carpathia Credit Union, which has a Ukrainian cultural background, is making accommodation for some culturally associated groups such as the Shevchenko Foundation, small cooperative, things of that nature, all tenancies that are short-term in very small space on a gross lease basis, where they're essentially accommodating these tenancies not to make money, but to provide space for them to operate within on an economical basis. Without that cultural association, those tenancies wouldn't likely be there, or they'd be it would be different in any case. So just to point that out. So page number 9, let's look at the subject property leases. We've given you 3 that are shown on there as they were the ones that we were able to best determine. We're looking at 520 to 791 square feet, very old start terms, and we're looking at gross lease rates between $11 and $12 based on what's included on the income and expense form. So gross rates of 11 to 12. Net rents would be obviously considerably below that. We look at the $8 a square foot shortfall allowance, assuming that's roughly correct. You get a sense of what the actual nets would be for those short-term smaller tenancies. So what would be an appropriate rental rate for the subject? Well, we've given you our same bank comparables here on page number 9. What would be an appropriate rental rate for the office space? Now, given time frame, I neglected to include the office comparables as well as the office market stats. We'll have that in the next property that we're dealing with, so I'll refer it to at that point. This subject property wouldn't be considered a suburban A or B or even really C. I would venture to say the location itself certainly points towards rental rates that would be lower than in other areas of the city. When we look at Main running from downtown north, there's exceptionally few office buildings. I can think of one former medical office building that's located considerably further north than this. Outside of that, I can't think of one that jumps out. So we have the issue that finding appropriate office rental rates in that area is very difficult, as the assessor has referred to as well. Suffice it to say, it's going to be on the low end of the range. Many reasons for that. We have 7,000 square foot floor plate. We have the location such as it is. The building is the age it is. I'm assuming the build out itself will be representative of its time frame as well. We've applied a rental rate of $11.50 a square foot to the office space for the subject property. Let's move on to expenses. I've given you the vacancy statistics for office space in Winnipeg, according to 4 different industry experts: Cushman, Colliers, Capital, and Johnson. So Class C suburban, let's assume this would be a Class C. Don't know that it would really fall within that, but in any case, we're looking at a range of 9.4%, 17.2%, and 5.3% for the Johnson report. Call it a B, and your ranges are 8.3 to 18%. Suburban overall, we're dominantly looking at 12%, both Cushman, Colliers, and Johnson roughly agreeing in their value there. We've applied a vacancy rate of 12% for this particular reason. Now, would it be higher in this location? Probably, but we're going with 12% in our valuation. Our expense commentary remains the same. Shortfall is the same. And I won't run us through capitalization rate, as we are in agreement with the City of Winnipeg at 8.65%. So the summary of our valuation is shown on page 13. Again, $11.50 rental rate, 12% vacancy, and cap rate of 8.65 gives us $1,823,000. And I'm open for questions.
Any questions, Mr. Cooper?
No questions.
Bob, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Marcel?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, so the difference is rental rate, vacancy or lower, expenses, and that's it, eh? So
That's it.
okay, I have no questions then. So thank you for your presentations on that. Let's go to item 8, which is 335 Main Street. Okay, you can begin, Mr. Kupfer.
Roll number 120938230000, 335 Main Street. This building was recently purchased by the Manitoba Métis Federation. This is the old BMO building right at the corner of Portage and Main. I'm sure you'll recognize it when you scroll down to pages 2 and 3 of my brief, which shows the photos of the building, as well as the subject sale history. Again, showing that sale price of $5 million in August of 2020. We have a 2023 modeled assessment of $7,897,000, which we'll be recommending today. Based on this sale, I requested an inspection of the property twice, actually, from Fairtax. Wasn't accommodated. I'm not sure what's happened here. Obviously, Trevor's taken over the appeals, so maybe I was just making the request to the wrong person. But regardless, I did not get a chance to inspect this property, regrettably, because there will likely be a change of use here, going from Bank of Montreal to the Manitoba Métis Federation. As I wasn't able to inspect it, unfortunately, it's just attached here are rent comparables for banks, same table that you've seen all day today. Page 4 of my brief has the basic income workup here, again showing our bank rate of $17.51 over 33,000 square feet, as well as $6.87 storage rate for the remaining square footage. 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall. This one has a modeled 7.35% capitalization rate, likely because of the advance age of the building. As it's quite a bit older, I can understand seeing a higher capitalization rate for this one. Scrolling down further, our income value summary just reiterates the information showing our estimated market value, $7,897,000. Page 6 and 7 has our capitalization rate tables, and there is no income and expense for this property as it was owner occupied by BMO. I don't believe they were submitting any INEs to us. So at this time, the best I can say is we'll recommend the 2023 assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, I guess just firstly, I would certainly like to apologize to Mr. Cooper if he was unable to inspect the property. I was not aware that you were asking, so I don't know what the disconnect there was. Certainly no intent to prevent you from seeing it or anything of that nature. Be happy for you to get through the property. Is based on the significant coverage of the Bank of Montreal moving and vacating and selling the property, the new ownership in place, is the city aware that there's been a change of use based on that information?
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to determine through the inspection, because I couldn't determine that just from the permit information that I looked up at the time. But that was my presumption, is that there was going to be a change of use, which would obviously require us to change our parameters, which would generate a different value, which meant we could have potentially signed a 15-1 on it, which is why I was emailing Magda about it quite a while ago. And then I'm not sure what that breakdown was.
Okay, fair enough. But as a question, it would be your understanding, I guess, that that a change in use is certainly anticipated for the subject, though?
That's what I would anticipate, yes. Of course, we would like to get an inspection done on the property if possible.
Of course. Of course. Okay. The transaction occurring in 2020 at August 6, 2020 at 5 million. That's been confirmed as an arm's length transaction, correct?
I didn't come across any notes saying that it wasn't. I'll put it that way.
Okay. And you described it, I don't want to belabor this. So the rent comparables that are here are bank related and not office, correct?
Correct.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcel, any questions?
What's the heritage status on this building now that has been sold?
I don't believe the heritage status changes with the sale. I think it would still be present, and it has some, I know it has some limiting factors to it, to what can be done.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, Bob, questions?
Yes, thank you. To the assessor. So to understand, based on hopefully a future pending inspection, there'll be a supplementary assessment issued and the model developed on the current use. Is that correct?
That would be the ideal course of action, I would say, yes.
Okay. And related to and how far back would that go?
Well, the sale it looks like the sale was August 2020, so no further back than that, at least.
would you be allowed to go back that far, or would there be a restriction in years?
Yeah, that's a good question. It might, it could end up getting bumped to, January 1st, 2021, for example.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's kind of an irrelevant question. My second question is, did you have access to a sales questionnaire regarding that 2020 sale, or were you able to review it at all?
I didn't see one. I can double check really quick here just to make sure we didn't send one. Maybe we didn't send one, maybe we did and it wasn't returned. I'm not 100%. I don't see a sales questionnaire uploaded in our system here.
Okay. And so the current assessment reflects a bank, and pending inspection, the valuation could significantly change. Is that correct? And it would be subject to a supplementary assessment.
It's all correct. Yeah, like we've been discussing today, a lot of these banks are modeled with higher rents and slightly lower cap rates. So,
okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions. So that brings us to the end of our hearing.
No, how about Trevor presenting?
Oh, sorry, Trevor. I'm ahead of my time again. Okay, Trevor, your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it must be architecture day for me or something here. We had brutalist architecture. Now we have neoclassical for the subject property. I guess I'd just like to address something up front, and I certainly appreciate Mr. Cooper's request to inspect the property and see the interior once an appeal was filed. However, we look at the significant coverage of this particular sale, as well as the fact that it occurred in 2020, well before the valuation time frame, and certainly well before our hearing date here. The city has had a very long period of time in which to look at the sale, as well as inspect the property. When you have coverage in all the major news media, both television, online, newspapers, etc., of the Bank of Montreal moving out of their original heritage structure on Main Street into one of the office towers adjacent to it, it's very clear that the property will not remain a bank. So I don't think that the suggestion that we should be awaiting a revaluation for based on a supplemental is, and that may occur, but I don't know that that's the issue that we're looking at here today. What we should be looking at is what is the market value of this building, not what model was applied by the city in the valuation of the property. So the fact that it's been valued as a bank, not specifically by Mr. Cooper, but by the city, again, was certainly avoidable, and it could have been modeled based on the appropriate office category for the property. So let's move into the report itself. Obviously, this is the original Bank of Montreal building. We're probably all familiar with it, at least from the exterior. Many moons ago, I recall going in there and exchanging currency. It was very impressive at the time, remains so today, but it is of its vintage. The property, let's look at my page number 3, just for a bit of background here. It was built in 1909 through 1913, just prior to the First World War. And we have a total leasable area of 38,458 square feet. Now, I don't here have the specific breakdown with regard to floor plates, etc. But what we're looking at is the main banking hall, which has extremely high ceilings, as we'll see when we look at the photos. We have a mezzanine area that rings that main banking hall. And then we have 2 floors above that, which have been converted into office space over time. If you, and I won't direct you to do this now, but if you wish to view it at the very back of my brief, beginning on page number 89, we have a document from the City of Winnipeg's Historical Buildings Committee from December 1980, describing the property in detail, as well as the original use of the building. The upper 2 floors were originally used as residential for the bank employees themselves, as well as executives. So that is the background of the building. We'll get into the historical categorization of it as well. I will point out, obviously, the building did sell in August of 2020, purchased from BMO by the Manitoba Métis Federation for consideration of $5 million, and it is an arm's length transaction. Quick view of the photos to the exterior, obviously on page 4. And then we have the interior on page 5. So beautiful looking open bank area, but what is its utility in the modern day? If we look at the reasons that are stated by Bank of Montreal with regard to their move from a building that they owned into the office tower next door, it was driven by the requirements of the marketplace. So their clients were essentially indicating that they needed to be in more accessible, more modern office space that would be more suitable to their needs. And obviously they've responded to that. So what does that say about the subject building? It's a beautiful heritage building that is now owned by the Métis Federation. But again, what is its use on the market? Well, we'll see what the Métis Federation ultimately uses it for. But when we look at the structure, I guess the obvious somewhat best fit, although not a great fit, is conversion into office space or something of that nature. We have a number of other buildings. I can think of one in particular that's just down the street from where we're sitting now, that have that were former bank buildings that have large main floor vaulted ceilings such as this that struggle to remain viable in terms of an investment. So photos, page 4 and 5, you can see the interior there. These are all of that main floor. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the upper floors, although I have seen some other photos, and it looks like a bit dated office space, certainly. Let's move on to page 8, building improvements. Again, property built between 09 and 1913. And the information that I have is that it's a grade 2 heritage designated building. Grade 2 designation states that its intent is to preserve the entire exterior of the building, erection or structure, and such of its interior elements as are specified in the listing, to ensure that all repairs are appropriate to the special architecture or historical interest, and to prevent or regulate demolition, removal, alteration, or repair of the remainder of such interior, et cetera, et cetera. So with regard to the subject property, they outline the main banking hall, the basement vaults, the northwest curved staircase, northwest corner office, on the mezzanine floor and marble fireplaces in offices and boardroom mezzanine. So these are all items that they are outlining in that particular regulation, in addition to the full exterior of the building, as well as anything of special architectural or historical interest. Again, we have 4 levels here, essentially main banking hall, mezzanine space, which rings the banking hall, and 2 floors of quasi-office. We're all familiar with where it's located, shown on page 9, location on page 10. Let's move into valuing the property. So let's assume that office space is the most appropriate value for the subject. We've presented our comparables of office space on page number 13. I will point out on page 13, BMO indicated in spring of 2020 that they would be vacating the property, and they subsequently did following the sale of the property. So, and prior to that time frame as well, they've moved to 201 Portage. So page 13, our rental comparables, subject property built in that 09 to 2013, not 09 to 1913 time frame, 38,000 square feet. Let's look at appropriate rental comparables. We have a large one at 260 St. Mary, considerably more modern office building, obviously 2018 lease at $13 a square foot. Central elevator core, beautiful space built out, 23,000 plus square feet lease at $13 a square foot, close to the valuation date. 155 Fort, which is Fort at York, 1928 building, older, closer to the subject age, 2017 lease at $12.13. But again, we're looking at 4,600 square feet here. That is all on a single floor. 155 Fort, again, $12 a square foot in 2017, similar size. Pardon me. We have the Grain Exchange building located north of the subject by the Richardson building there, obviously 1906, similar vintage, obviously office space. 2020 lease at $11.50 a square foot there for 4,300 plus square feet. We can keep going on here. The Power building shown. Actually, no, sorry, 261 Vaughan, built in 1928. This is adjacent to Hudson Bay Company building. 1928 age, $11 a square foot. In 2018, obviously a tiny lease, so not a great amount of applicability in that, but you can see what is being paid on a similar vintage building. 303 Main. This is an interesting one, actually. I realize the lease is a little bit older in 2012, but this is the building immediately south of the subject property. It's the Grain Commission building. We have a 2012 lease for a significant amount of space, a very large lease, 30,000+ square feet at $9.84 a square foot. So that's giving you a good indication of a sizable lease rate in the same vicinity. Will that have advanced since that time? Probably. I'm sure it probably will have, but that is also better space than what you could say the subject would be. Another interesting one, 365 Main, Richardson building, obviously $11 a square foot for 22,000+ square feet in 2016. And finally, 317 Donald. This is the Credit Union Central building located just north of Mountain Equipment Co-op on Portage Avenue, built in 2005, so very modern, 16,000+ square feet. And we have a rental rate of $8.50 a square foot for a lease in 2017. Having an apples to apples comparison for the subject is not going to happen. So the exercise is framing what an appropriate rental rate would be for the subject. So really, I've applied a rental rate of $11.50 a square foot. Would they achieve that? I'm not sure that they would. Certainly, if we look at the comparables, I think there's room to say that they could be lower than that. So applying $11.50 a square foot is certainly conservative. We then have two asking rents, 259 Portage. This is the Paris building fronting on Portage Avenue, just west of Portage and Main. 2020 lease at 1075 a square foot for 34,000 square feet, very similar to the subject. And finally, the Power building asking $11 a square foot in 2020 for 6,200 square feet. We have market stats on page 14. I've applied $11.50. I think that's probably above perhaps what it would achieve, but that is what we're going with in our valuation. Let's move on to vacancy. Market stats are shown on page 15. We're downtown, so at a maximum, we'd be looking at Class C, which we're not. This would be below that. We have a fully vacant building of heritage class. Class C is giving us a range of 13.3 to 19.5%. Downtown overall, we're looking at 11.3 up to 13.9%. We've applied a vacancy rate to the subject of 15%, not 6% as it indicates in my brief, but 15% as you'll see in the valuation, based on two factors. A, we have a fully vacant building. I don't see it being a quick turnaround in terms of leasing the subject property up. And the market stats are pointing to 15% and or higher. So conservatively, again, we're using 15% in our valuation. Our discussion on expenses remains the same. We won't get into that, and we can move on to the capitalization. So page number 17, I've given you stats from both Cushman, Wakefield, and as well as Colliers with regard to cap rate ranges for investment grade properties. Again, the subject property is not going to fall within these ranges. It will be above them based on the factors already discussed. Class B, we're looking at 6.5 to 7% or 6% to 6.75%, depending who you're looking at. In their quotes. Now, these would be buildings such as Class B buildings on St. Mary or properties of that nature, which we're all familiar with. This is far from that. Class subject property might be a Class C at the most, not tracked by these brokerages. So we present our market evidence in the chart on page 17. All properties that were arm's length transactions purchased for the in-place net income. So we have 259 Portage. This is the Paris building, built between 1928 and 62, traded at 9.7 million, 2015 sale at a cap rate of 8.9%. 294 Portage. Property originally built in 1908, obviously updated since that time. Traded in 2018 at a cap rate of 8.7%. Each of these would be more traditional office buildings than the subject property is, as you can see from their photos on pages 17, 18, and 19. Following that, we have 380 Donald, originally built in 1910. Cap rate in 2017 of 10%. And at the very bottom, we have 200 Portage, obviously very different than the subject property, located right at Portage in Maine. This is the Scotiabank, former Scotiabank building, traded in 2017 at a cap rate of 7.9%. Now Scotiabank is moving out of there and or had moved out, so that building would be vacant essentially coming up following the sale. The photos show you what we're looking at here. So certainly our most comparable would be 259 Portage as well as 294 Portage in terms of vintage. What do we have? We have a heritage protected building that's fully vacant, that is not particularly conducive to build out as office space for multi-tenancy, turning the building into an investment property. Now, what are you going to cap that at? Our comps indicate that it should be a minimum of 8%. Certainly could be higher than that based on what we see. But again, conservatively, we have used a cap rate of 8% in our valuation. Page number 19 gives you this value. Summarized, we're using rental rate of $11.50 a square foot, the vacancy rate of 15%, shortfall of 8%, expense allowance of 7% rather, and again, a very conservative cap rate of 8%. This gives us a final market valuation of $3,802,000. The addendum materials include the commercial brokerage's information as well as the historical summary document starting on page A9. And I'm open for questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
Your net income, $304,173. When you divide that by the actual arm's length sale price, what cap rate do you get?
I did not do that particular exercise. Again, we're imputing things at that point.
Well, this is your leasable area and your rental rate that you're imputing, correct? And net income of $304,000.
It's not. Well, again, you're asking me to take a theoretical position based on what we feel it would transact for and relate it to a sale price that it wasn't based upon. So I don't really see the value in that.
Your value is hypothetical. The sale price is the only thing that's not hypothetical in this. So using your hypothetical net income and the actual sale price, what cap rate would you derive?
It's not information that I've gone through, and I think I've already explained my position on it.
No other questions?
Hey, Marcel, questions?
No questions.
Bob, questions?
Well, the question that I would like to know is what is the cap rate on a sale that occurred on this property 7 months before the base date that the assessment is based on? Does anybody have that calculation?
Well, because
I do, and it's my question, I believe, that you're asking me. So there would be no cap rate because there would be no tenant in place. Therefore, categorically, there is no cap rate. They're purchasing the structure, so there is no cap rate to be developed from that transaction.
Okay. Mr. Assessor, you asked a question about the hypothetical NOI. What cap rate did you come up with? Can you calculate that for us?
Using the net income projected by the agent of $304,000 and the sale price of $5 million, I came up with a cap rate of 6%.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, and I have no questions. So gentlemen, thank you very much for your presentations. We have heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very much for your able presentations.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks.
I'm going home now.
Me too. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to prepare my next